All right, we have Chris Balasinski with us, and I want to take a little minute, let you introduce yourself, and kind of, how you got into this thing, and then just talk a little bit about Ref Union and what you guys have going out in California. So, first of all, thanks for spending some time with us. But let's start with that. Just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to this point.
Yes. Personally, I've been reffing for 10 years, 9 years collegiately, a little bit on the women's side, and I switched over to the men's. I had a cup of coffee in the NBA Development League back when it was still called the D League before the G League.
Right.
And about 8 years ago, I started like a little referee assigning agency, started assigning a little youth ball on the side. And since then, it's grown to what is now known as Ref Union around Southern California.
That's pretty cool. So how long have you been involved with Ref Union? When did that start?
So we started around 2010. It's kind of hard to really pinpoint when we started because it was like an idea for the first year, and then we finally got our first clients, and then they started growing, and then that's when it kind of took off, and it kind of got away from me a little bit. That now it's my full-time gig.
Yeah, that's cool. I know we've had some conversations, and I've spent probably almost a year kind of following you on social media and website, and we've never really talked until now. But well, walk us through Ref Union and the structure and what types of customers you guys serve.
No problem. So at our core, I'm an assigner just like so many other assigners on the recreational and club circuit that you've seen. I have my own clients, and so do the other assigners within our Ref Union network. But what kind of separates us is that we actually play friendly with each other. We communicate. We don't consider each other as adversaries. There are so many games out there that there's more than enough to go around. And we kind of adhere to the principles of a union, which means we represent the referees. We adhere to the process of collective bargaining. So while our competitors, essentially, they let the clients, they let the tournament directors and league directors dictate a price point, and they take the first offer, we actually try to negotiate. We come in with a number that we think is fair for that level of play or that format of game. We hear what the tournament director is offering. We go back to our guys. Sometimes if it's a close thing, I actually email them to ask, hey, is this good with you guys? Let's put it to a vote. If we feel like we could do better, I go back and present a counter offer. And we go back and forth until we're both mutually unhappy with what we get, but that's the process of negotiation.
So it actually sounds like, which is kind of going to sound funny when I say this, but you treat it truly like a business.
Yes, we do.
Whereas I think officials across the country, for that matter, particularly in Georgia, I think have been, we've always come up under the idea that we do this for the kids, or we do this for all these other reasons, but I've always maintained there is a sector of people that do this for money.
Right. They're not mutually exclusive. I mean, doctors don't go into it for the money. They want to save lives. They want to help people. And we love the game. We want to, the kids to have fun. But God dang it, we're providing a legitimate service. We have a talent. It does, not just anybody can get off the stands and become a referee. And so I feel that we should charge appropriately for our importance in the game.
What's another thing too that I like to talk about? I've served on some economic development committees, and you bring up, particularly in your market where these large tournaments are being played in these cities, the economic impact of one of those tournaments is gigantic for a local community. You take the officials away, literally, you take the economic impact away, literally. Right. So when people devalue an official, I think it's a lack of education, really, is what it is, as to what an official really brings to the table. And so, I don't want to sound cheesy with it, but at the same time, that's a very real point, and it's big business. And I don't think we treat it that way in a lot of cases, So.
Right. I mean, I don't know how it is in Georgia, but here we got just to park at the dang arena is like $20. To get in the door is $10, $15 per person, unless you get a weekend pass for $30 or $40.
That's right.
Concessions there are always ridiculously overpriced.
Sure.
And that's not even counting the registration fees to even get the kids, to get the teams into the tournament.
Right.
So there is a lot of money. And man, then we got sponsorship. We got those events sponsored by Adidas and every Nike and whatever, any other brand. We just want a fair cut of all that money going through the door.
That's right. So I mean, it's really, you know, supply, demand. It's recognizing your worth, and more importantly, it's holding that line, which I think we're really bad at. You know, as a when I say bad at, I'm talking about all officials. You know, I think sometimes we ourselves devalue what we're really worth. You know.
Well, I think on the club and recreational circuit, the idea that a lot of referees have is that they're doing this to practice and to train, because eventually they're going to get to Division I or the NBA, and that's where they're going to cash in. Right. All of this is practice or training to get up to that highest level. Sure. When really the numbers aren't there. You're not all going to get into Division I, not even Division II. Division II doesn't even pay that much. Right. So really, you should take care of your finances right here and at the level you're at. And yeah, go shoot for the stars, go shoot for the pros. But I feel it's the assigner's responsibility. It's kind of like our duty to the refs to protect them at the level that they're at.
Sure.
Encourage them to keep going up, but that shouldn't be justification for why we're getting paid such a horrible wage at the grassroots circuit.
It's kind of funny to me because when you put it that way, I think about like a baseball player, you know, who's going to be a major league star, and so they do, you know, all these things because they're going to make it when they get to the big leagues, but they don't take care of themselves at 12 years old and at 14 years old and at 16 years old. It's the exact same process you just described. They get these starry eyes and they forget to take care of right now. So right now is what's sacrificed in the end, you know? So, well, how many games, kind of talk about like volume here. How many games are you assigning per year? How many officials do you, you know, what type of pool of officials do you have in terms of numbers?
So our mailing, when we have a tournament, we send out a blast email that, hey, this is what we got available, you know, put it on your calendars. And then later, as we get closer, they send us availability. That mailer goes out to about 600 to 700 referees, somewhere in that range. And that's only my list. All the other assigners within the network have their own lists, and sometimes we share them. But I mean, mostly, I don't want to email a referee that's 100 miles away about my tournament. That's just going to go right into spam, or he's going to delete it. So we maintain our own rosters. And yeah, that stands about 600, 700 for me, maybe 200 for some of the other guys. Last year, we clocked in at about 9,900 and something games. That's actually down from the year before, where we, you know, broke through 10,000. And that's just my chapter of the ref union. My friend Yogi down in San Diego, he probably has about 8,000 to 10,000 of his own games. Baja and down in La Jolla, that's a slightly smaller geographic area. So I'd say 5,000 to 6,000, although she does multiple sports. So who knows? So I guess combined within the ref union network, easily 25,000 to 30,000 games a year. And that's just in Southern California. That's how big our market is.
That's incredible. So what's interesting to me is like, you don't hoard an official. An official can be part of multiple assigners is what you're saying.
Right. And
yeah.
I mean, and that's kind of the point. By all the assigners working together, and now the referees can have access to all these opportunity without hurting anybody else's feelings. Now, I mean, we try as assigners to make our own lives easier. So for example, if a referee hears of my event first, but he's 50 miles away, and then a week later, a tournament opens up with another ref union assigner that's 5 minutes from his house, I'm not going to have him work 12 games for me. I'm probably going to communicate with that assigner and say, hey, I'll call him up, use him. He's right next door to that gym. I'll find someone more local. And that way everybody gets their games filled and everybody's working, you know, whatever's more efficient for them.
See, the counter to that is we work in almost extreme opposites when I talk about the high school. I mean, and Georgia now is a hotbed, kind of like California, when it comes to, you know, the private sector with AAU basketball, Perfect Game baseball, you know, Pop Warner's football. So there's a lot of that happens, but I'm more involved at the high school level, which we talked about. That's some differences there, but see, if you're a member of one association here, you're in that association. So
Mhm.
you can't go back and forth or work for multiple assigners for the same sport. So it's interesting. Y'all actually take the direct opposite approach, and it's more the assigner gets the schedule,
Okay,
and then
well, why is your system like that? How does that benefit anybody if we're going to monopolize referees? They're all independent contractors. How do you hoard them without pushback? Here, I tell you what, when I took an account over from another assigner that's not within the network, we butt heads.
Mhm.
He tried to make it like that. And if you work for Chris, you're not going to work for me. That was the best thing he could have done for me, because
Right,
all of his referees revolted and they
right,
all hopped on board because they thought his demand was completely asinine. That
sure,
as independent contractors, you can't tell us not to work for other people. That's
right,
like, so I thank him for that because that helped me grow my numbers.
sure.
And so how does it work in Georgia? Why does Georgia get away with that kind of stuff?
Well, so you got remember there's two different ideas of officiating, right? There's the private sector and then there's the public sector. So when I say the public sector, who services what we would refer to as GHSA, or the Georgia High School Athletic Association, that network of high schools. So, um, but even in Georgia, it's kind of that mentality. I've worked, some other college associations, and if you were to dare take games from this other assigner, then you'd be blackballed with that particular assigner. So what's fascinating is that you guys literally 180 degrees from what we do, and you're able to demand work together and demand price points that are obviously working for you. You know,
I mean, we're trying. We're getting it up there. Again, not all assigners fall into line with us. There's still going to be the cowboys that are going to undercut our rates no matter what.
sure, yeah,
So those are the guys we consider our competition, so to speak. But really, they're just low ballers,
uh huh,
and there's always going to be a market for them, just like there's going to be a market for cheap goods. But so we've managed over the last 5 years to kind of make them the outliers.
yeah. I
Referees
mean, it
will
sounds like
Yeah,
by the number of
referees will still
officials
go
that
work
you.
for them if there's nothing else, on the table. But even they kind of know what's going on, and they would rather work for us because we got their backs and we always pay them better.
Man, that's crazy to think that idea, which from a business principle is sound, right? And that it actually works. You know what I'm saying? It's just funny to me that we think that it can't work, but it works every day with what you're describing. Let me ask you this: how are you in terms of your supply of officials? Do you have enough to cover games? Do you have enough to be selective, or where are you at there?
Personally, I'm comfortable. I can be selective if it's an event that's 16 courts or less. When it grows to 20 to 25, where I have like 700 games on a weekend, that's where it's open the floodgates, everybody come in.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I don't want to make this sound like a promo. Our coverage rate is about 99.98%.
Right.
So we're going to get our games covered.
Sure.
Now, that doesn't mean they're all quality. There's times where you just got to get some bodies on the floor. My clients know that. The referees know that.
Right.
Sometimes it's young kids that, rookie officials that don't quite know what they're doing yet. Other
Right.
times it's old timers that are 20 years past their prime, just kind of hanging on to the game.
Sure.
But in the end, we get everything covered. We'd like to get an influx of talent in to just make referees work harder. Right now, it's not a very competitive field. Referees know that they can screw up and they're still going to get games the next day. And I
Right.
mean, and I don't mean like screw up as in a call, but they
Right.
can show up late 3 times in a row. And I can't really fire them because if they're talented, then I mean, what can I say? I still need them. I still
Sure.
need them, and just I just repeatedly find them if they keep coming in late.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's where kind of our numbers stand.
So in Georgia, I think, when you look at the national, brands like the NFHSs and the NASOs, um, it's pretty easy to find the story of the shortage of officials, right?
Right.
And so I think Georgia's in that boat too, and kind of hear conflicting messages. But I can definitely tell you that we experience the same issues in terms of qualified officials. Um, but what's interesting to me, again, looking at this from a business perspective, is that you understand your capacity, whereas you set your capacity, and that dictates the quality you can put out there. Whereas, or it dictates the quality you can't put out there, depending on how many games you accept, right?
I mean, I tell my clients this thing. My job is to get you the best available referee. If they're not that good, they're still the best available. I
Right.
cannot spawn fantastic referees. So the argument is like, if you raise your rates or you make the working conditions better, that's going to help attract the better referee.
The ones they want.
I can only do so much, like by pulling referees out of my pocket. If they don't want to work, I can't force them. That's their right. So really, it's a back and forth between me and the client as to how can we attract these refs,
Sure.
because I already know I can get the best ones out there. It's just a matter of, you know, there's limits to my powers of persuasion.
Well, yeah, and kind of what I was saying though is like, you said once you get north of 16 courts, things start getting tough, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so that means those courts mean you need some number of officials to be, to assign that coverage. Well, so you can literally dictate what you're taking in terms of capacity to match the quality that you need, right? So my point is that in Georgia, we're assigned schedules in the high school world. So regardless of how many officials we have a number of games to cover, and then you have to find warm bodies like you referenced.
Right.
So it's actually, again, the direct opposite. We have the officials that we have, and then we are given a capacity that we have to meet, whereas you're able to set your capacity to the official base that you have. Does that make sense?
Yes, although I never like to turn away business. So
Sure. I mean, of
if my
course.
client says, "Hey, we have 50 courts," God damn it, I gotta find a way to fill those 50 courts. If that means calling referees from way out of the area and like out of my own pocket, kind of bribing them, some gas money,
Right.
I'll
Yeah.
do it because it's a once every few months kind of event. I can do that. I can eat that extra cost.
Sure.
But I just don't want to do it too often because I'm like, well, shoot, I need to make, my cut too.
Right. Right. So I just think it's interesting that you and the free enterprise side of things have complete control of your demand, how many games that you have, and you have control of your supply because you have a network of people that you work with where you can scale your number of available officials up or down depending on what's going on that weekend. So that's just really interesting stuff from a business standpoint that I think it's fascinating. So let me ask you this. So let's talk a little bit about game fees, because that's something that you tout a lot, and your number is on your website. It promotes 25 an hour. It's kind of like the magic number. Talk to
Right.
me a little bit about where that number comes from, how you set your game fees.
Um, I mean, I don't remember the special formula we used. We just kind of noticed that 25 per game running clock format on the hour allowed me to get the quality of referees, onto the tournament that I felt needed it.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain extent, based on the tournament fees, registration, all this ticket prices and all we were talking about, it felt fair. It felt like a fair proportion of the revenue is going into the referees if we put it at 25 per game per hour. Every director should be able to afford that. We would like to raise that up. Unfortunately, we still get the assigners, those undercutters, kind of nipping at our heels, promoting 22, 23. And so we can't elevate our fees. That kind of limits our leverage in negotiation because of them. So 25 has kind of been the sweet spot. We're edging it up. We talked just a second ago about, dictating the workload we bring in. We've started to do that. I don't accept any new clients at under 28. The old clients are grandfathered in at 25. That's still what we consider the minimum, and I'm not going to make anybody feel guilty for paying that. However,
Right.
for me to get up and assign something new, 28 guys, because we want to eventually get up to something new. We've been at 25 for the last 5 or 6 years.
Right. Right. So just to we did a compensation study about a year ago now. And so what I did was I was like, okay, where are these officials going? Like, what are some other options they have? So some of them are going to junior college. Some of them are going to, NCAA. Some of them are doing other things. They're coaching, or they're, doing private training. So what I did was I went and looked at what I call competitive alternatives for officials. And when you go out and look at guys that are doing like private training, private lessons, even like the security guards that are at the facilities that are guarding our games, when I evaluated, probably a dozen different competitive alternatives for officials, I found the range between $24 and $31 per hour is what was competing and pulling these officials away. So when I look at the study on our end, we are typically making under $15 an hour pretty much across the board. And that's generous in some sports. So yeah, I know. So my point is that when you factor in, because remember now, it's different in high school. You put a guy on the court, he goes out there and works 4 or 5 games, and bam, he gets, he's making money. Whereas we drive for one game and turn around and drive an hour back, So it's totally different. It's a totally different ball of wax. But at the same time, it's where the officials are leaving and going to outfits like yourself, because you guys can hold a number better than what we're experiencing over here, if that makes any sort of sense. So the numbers that I find support your $25 an hour a lot.
Yeah. Because, shoot, I'm losing people to Trader Joe's, $17 an hour plus benefits, and you don't get yelled at by stupid parents.
Yeah,
all day.
You got a whole nother thing going on in California. It's a totally different. There's a lot of differences, but I don't want to lose sight that there's a lot of similarities too. And while people may not agree on the number, I think that what I'm here to talk about more is the thought process. And I really like, some of the things that you bring to the table here. So, so in a world where you have to compete for games and games and schedules, how do you, I don't want to say this word, but how do you sell your product? Like, how do you differentiate what you do versus those guys that kind of nip on your heels a little bit, at 22 and a half, rate?
We don't. I haven't marketed for a new client in years. My current clients are actually growing. So my biggest one is Open Gym Premier. They're expanding throughout the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And I got to follow them, because I don't really want them using different referees at different sites, because then, we lose all that continuity and consistency.
Sure.
So as they grow and they have more and more events, suddenly it's like, I don't need any new clients. Same thing with even the YMCAs. They're growing and,
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Chris, we want to do Fridays now. We want to do Saturdays.
Right.
Like, great. So I don't need new clientele. If a new client wants me, wants us, I tell them the new price point is 28. And, I give them the same kind of take it or leave it approach, which a lot of a lot of assigners and tournament directors try to give to the referees. It's like, it's 22 or nothing. I tell them it's 30 or 28 or nothing, again, depending on the
Go
format.
the other way. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What I don't like, there's got to be some balance here. Tournament directors have been calling the shots way too long, giving us the take it or leave it approach.
Sure.
It's time for the assigners to do the same thing, because it's a mutual relationship. It's completely symbiotic. They need us, and we need them. So,
well, what helps that message too is to get the actual boots on the ground, the guys that are working the games, to have the same, mantra or rally cry, whatever. If they feel the same way, then your message, it runs deep into your association or your group, and they're not out there taking those $21 games, because what's going to pay them right now is not likely going to pay them in the future,
Right.
So I don't know, man. I just find, it's refreshing to hear a totally different approach, because I've been in a rut, if you will, over here, in Georgia. We just do it this way. So you don't really have the opportunity to talk to other people that do it different ways,
Yeah, you really got to push that message. You really got to get referees to start respecting their craft. They talk about it all the time at camps, that this is a craft, this is an art form, but you guys sell yourself out for so little, based on all the perceptions that they may have about reaching D1, or that, hey, this is for the kids and all that. We're just trying to push that away. Not completely away, but, put the business side of it into it, because the tournament directors, they're all about the business. They can try to sell about being about the kids, but this is their livelihood.
Yeah.
For a lot of referees, this is their livelihood too. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, then defend your livelihood defend, and not only yours, but referees years to come. We want them to come into the avocation better than with the way we left it.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that when we haven't raised rates for the last 5-6 years?
That's one thing I preach about all the time is the sustainability of the avocation. And I think sometimes we're our own worst enemies. I think it's just because we're so disconnected. And what I hope to do with this podcast over time is to begin to connect these ideas and say, hey, we may have different ways of getting there, but we all kind of have the same goal. How do we align ourselves a little bit more than what we are aligned? And with all the different associations and the different sports, we're very fractured. And that's why it's really cool to talk to you in California and share similarities and learn some differences, so. What do you think? So the one thing that I'm curious about, and one thing I would brag on Georgia about, and I've actually done a little bit of research on California, particularly basketball in California. Georgia does a really good job at training. We have a lot of college officials here. We have a lot of, just Atlanta being an international airport, it's a common area getting in and out of. We have a lot of professional officials and referees in this area. So training is all over the place in Georgia, particularly with Georgia high school. I think they do a great job training. I don't agree with all of it, but I think they do a good job. I think they set the bar in a lot of ways. I've heard that California is definitely a gold standard of training. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. That's what I've been told. What are your thoughts on your training? And then my real question that I'm going to get to is, how do you ensure that your guys are trained for the games that they're calling?
This is a question I always have trouble answering, even when my own clients give them to me on like an interview or an application process. You're right. California is kind of like the gold standard. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have to represent my state here.
Sure.
But that's really more, I feel that's more at the top. I feel we produce some of the world's best referees. That doesn't necessarily mean it trickles all the way down to the grassroots and recreational level. Managing a roster of over 600 and all their personal problems, and my number one hat is that whole representative, negotiator, union rep hat, that I've gotten away of focusing on the training. There are so many camps that I figure that's their industry. Mm-hmm. Mine is the business side of it. I tell my guys again, or my clients again, I'll get you the best ones available. I'll get you the varsity guys. I'll get you the up and comers. I mean, it's so subjective that you kind of have to trust your eye for talent. And I mean, we can all see a really good referee when we see him.
Sure.
And after that, it's just like, do you hustle? Do you try? Do you work hard? I can sell that. Mm-hmm. The guy that's busting his ass getting from baseline to 28-foot mark. Mm-hmm. In terms of how do I promise that they're trained the best? I mean, I can't. They have to go out there and kind of, if they want to pursue this legitimately as a career, the onus is on them.
So let me interrupt you right there. So you kind of let the performance dictate how well trained they are, and I mean, it's almost of sorts of like the training's on the official. Your job is to put them in the best position to make money. Essentially,
yeah, definitely the latter part. The training, I mean, there's camps, there's programs out there that, since that's their specialty, I leave it to them.
Right.
And in terms of, the client and putting the best product on the floor, I mean, I could put 3 NBA guys out there and there's still going to be complaints. And so
yeah,
I go to my clients and be like, look, is he working his butt off? Was he there on time? Did he manage the game? That's what matters to me. Right. After, we can nitpick all you want after the tournament's done and see if I have to, for example, send out a memo and be like, hey guys, game's got a little rough. This client wants us a little tighter on the fouls. Good. We'll do that.
Right.
Because each client wants something a little bit different.
Sure.
But to try to have one uniform standard across 600 referees, no way. I think their energy is better served elsewhere.
I got you. So with that last statement, you're what you're telling me is you pick your battles, but you know your guys and you know what they're capable of. And if somebody doesn't cut the mustard, essentially they don't have a home in your organization.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to cut them loose. Again, if they're working hard, I can always save you.
Yeah.
you know, you miss all and that's actually my job, is to have your back, you know, as you're growing through those, you know, what do you call them? Growing, as you're going through those growing pains on the court.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not going to put, you know, it's my job also not to put you on a game that you're not ready for. I'll put you
Right.
on the third graders if you're struggling. And then, I mean, you would really have to mess up disastrously for me to let you go based on court performance.
So you just move their levels of you know, games they work to suit
right.
their ability. That makes sense. That
And
makes
I'll
sense.
handle the complaints like, oh, he didn't call any fouls. Hey, I got you. But hey, look at him. He's trying out there for you. Isn't that what you really need? And then I pair him up with a more veteran official that'll manage the majority of the game.
Have you ever thought about pairing up with some of the camp, you know, the clinicians that are doing the camps, and just make that your camp, like your recommended camp?
We have not been the biggest proponents of camps. We kind of think one of the problems in grassroots officiating and the whole camp process is that there's too many of them sometimes.
Right.
Every referee that gets to Division I seems to want to capitalize on their new status by throwing up a camp. And then all of a sudden, it's like, where are all the paid opportunities? Oh, they're gone because it's another camp and another camp. So I would feel weird if I then kind of followed that trend and started my own camp.
Right.
Now, what we're doing here, and, you know, one of the biggest coups of our year, you know, as interrupted as it is establishing a better relationship with the junior NBA program. Gary Zielinski is now the director of youth and amateur development as a new pipeline into the G League system. So we're trying our best to work with him, have local NBA guys, and there's a ton of them in Southern California, come in, run some clinics, go out and observe, you know, the referees as they're running around doing their job. It's not really as much of a camp because, I mean, they're not just going to park themselves on one court and watch you for the entire 40 minutes. But they'll roam around for a few hours in a day. They'll give you bits and pieces of feedback and advice. And at the same time, the referees are still getting paid. They're still, you know, they're providing the service. They're getting a little bit of training on the side. And I think that's kind of the best balance to it, because I don't want to take paid opportunities away from the guys to start a camp. That's not what we're about. So there's a way to integrate better education into the system we have going right now.
Yeah, I agree with it. So you really do, and you're moving toward that concept of you're just taking a totally different angle on it, and you're just kind of more like real life OJT training, you know, rather than go sit down in a classroom and listen to this person, you know, with a PowerPoint. If that makes
right, because referees want to learn, but it's just better to learn on the job and still get paid and not have these doubts afterwards. Like, man, the camp cost me $300. I lost out on $300 of missed wages. It's a $600 weekends when you break it down like that. So yeah, they're getting better, but then guess what? If they don't get picked up by a college conference, then they're so much better, but then they're back to working 25 per hour for another year. After a while, that starts dragging down on morale.
Mm-hmm.
So why not integrate the education while they're working? Sure. And that's what we're trying to do. And they love that because they want to learn, they want to get better, but I don't think that they deserve to sacrifice so much revenue for the opportunity.